the approaches to resource management, and specifically in the last class we are discussing what is resource, and then we discussed the different types of resources, that is man-made resources, natural resources, and under natural resources we are speaking about what is CPR, what is open access resource, then we are speaking about the private resource and all. But today we'll specifically discuss the approaches of resource management which usually we debate. See, now since 1980s specifically, means last 40 years, a debate is continuing, and prior to that also, not exactly 1940, but if you look into around from 60s onwards, the debate started, but more rigorously after 80s, the debate is being started that how to manage the resources, whether who will be the responsible for managing the resources, who will be the controlling authority of managing the resources, who will have the rights, that specifically the ownership right to manage the resources, and who will hold that authority and capacity to manage the resources. These are the very basic questions pertaining to the resource management. So lots of debate is continuing since late 60s to till date. The different governments throughout the world have adopted the different approaches on managing the resources from time to time. Whether this resource belongs to the rural area, tribal area, or urban area, whether this resources belongs to water, forest, land, or any other resources, but the debate is continuing how to manage. Sometimes we debate who is the owner of these resources, who will be given the responsibility of this management of these resources, because all the resources we know that it belongs to the center. But is it possible in the part of the central government to manage the resources? Is it possible in the part of the state government to manage the resources? So then what should be the mechanism of managing the resources? Who will be the person who can manage the resources? How we will adopt the mechanism to manage the resources? So these are various questions which comes to our mind while we are discussing about the resource management. So we should be very much careful in the context of the resource management, and to discuss about the what should be the best mechanism of managing the resources. Please be very careful on these issues, but this is a very what exactly approach we are going to discuss in the development studies. When you will jump into the market as a development professional, these are the things which is very, very essential, irrespective of discipline. So these are the approaches which you are all speaking about. You all might have heard this community-driven development, supply-driven development, all these things. So means what should be the major approaches in the resource management that we are going to discuss. See, since centuries, the resource management has become a very serious issue, but last specifically around 50 years, we are debating more on this, and specifically in the last 40 years, the lots of the various governments throughout the globe has changed their approaches in the context of development and also in the context of resource management. But it is not that they have changed the approach only in the resource management, they have changed the approach of development. So that we are going to discuss. So in the contemporary days, lots of people are arguing that they instead of managing giving more emphasis on resources, creating new infrastructure, we should give emphasis on how we can manage the existing infrastructure. Because you see, if you look at this, even all these 5 years plans, even now we don't have any 5-year plans. So if you look at all these 5-year plans in our country, and you will see that we always come with new infrastructures. We invest huge money in our budget in new infrastructure. But now, the last few years, if you look into our budget, we are giving more emphasis on that how we can manage the existing infrastructure. See, in the initial phase of independence, we invested huge money in construction of dams for the irrigation. No, but what we are doing now, if you look into that, we are not in favor of constructing large dams, big dams. Rather, we are thinking of how we can go for what said approach, how we can go for small dams. So how we can think of, we have been thinking that how the small system can be developed and the how we can invest money in sustaining the existing infrastructure. Because due to the lack of resources, due to the lack of management strategy, the existing infrastructure could not sustain. That was a major setback. That was a major problem. So for which what happened? Now we are trying to discuss that what kind of new approach, new perspective, which was earlier the resource perspective, now we are moving towards people's perspective. Means how we can extract the people's perception in managing the resources, managing the infrastructure, managing the structure, different existing structure. So now we'll discuss about the different theories, different approaches is being adopted at different point of time by different thinkers. If you look into that, in Hardin, 1968, Hardin is a very physics professor, is a very renowned physics professor. You see, that's what I'm telling. It is interdisciplinary, it is disciplinary. There is no such boundary that who has given what opinion, irrespective of their discipline. They've given different kind of approach and management. Hardin in 1968 published an article where in the journal name of the science, where he was telling about the tragedy of commons. The title of the article is The Tragedy of Commons. Please, if you can download this article, please read Hardins in 1968, the journal is the science, where he published The Tragedy of Commons. Very, very interesting writing, small articles, very, very interesting thought, by Garret Hardin. What Hardin was telling there? He was giving an example. He told that he was keep on looking into the land where the resource was plentifully available. And what he found that the local peoples who are residing this side by this grazing land was mostly depending on cattle rearing for their livelihoods. And when they found the land is having ample size of grazing resources, they started buying as much as cattle, and the competition increased among the villagers or the people living in that locality, that how many cattle they can buy, they can increase their cattle size. Because what they found that the food or the grass was completely free, because the land is very much open and there are plenty of grass was there in the field. And what the villagers feel that if we'll procure more and more cattle, our cattle can have food here and they can give us milk, and also the plus everything we can sell in the meat we can sell in the market, and we can earn more money. So the competition increased among the villagers, that how much money we can invest in procuring more and more cattle, so that our economy will enhance. The individual economic of each individual household will even increase. That was the main thrust. So that was the main thrust of Hardin's, that Hardin was looking into. And what happened? The time came after a few years when the entire grasslands become a deserted. Because if you increase, because I have told you that whenever we plan anything, we always think about the carrying capacity. When we think, suppose Amravati city came as a new capital city of Andhra Pradesh. The government has planned that the city with a vision of 300 to 500 years. It is not that for 30 years, not for 50 years, rather 300 to 500 years. So means we have an assumption that if there will be migration to here, the population size may increase up to this level, so that even in spite of that, the city will be able to accommodate the rising population even till 500 years. But you see what exactly happened, what Hardin was telling here. Hardin was telling the land was completely free. It was open access resources. What I was telling about yesterday, the resource which was open to everybody. Sarkar ka mal darya mein dal. So means it was open to everybody. Then the villagers compete with each other, procuring more and more cattle. And what they did, they entered into the lands and consumed more and more grass. Then after some time, the carrying capacity of that land is having certain limitation. The procurement of more cattle, the rise of cattle size went beyond the carrying capacity of the land. For which what happened? For which the land got degraded, the resource got over. So then what happened? Then the entire villagers get into a tragedy. Tragedy means then slowly there was a huge shortage of food. People are forced to sell their cattle. Most of the cattle died because of lack of foods. Their economy got completely disturbed because as there was no food available, fodder was not available. Then the cattle's the milk capacity got drastically reduced. Then also their health condition becomes very weak. Some cattle become very kind of diseased, so they are forced to sell. Some are died, some dead. And so what exactly Hardin was telling? Hardin quote unquote gave a theory there with a concept called tragedy of commons. So means here the common means the villager as a common, quote unquote common means the villagers. What they did? The common people who were thinking of extracting the resources for the personal benefits didn't have that vision that if we will keep increase the cattle as a more, then the time will come, so then entire resource will be over and we will be under this kind of tragedy. So means what exactly the Hardin was telling here? Hardin was telling that here the resource was in the hands of the commons. The resource was in the hands of the peoples. He was telling that if there could have been any kind of mechanism here, what Hardin was telling, if instead of giving this management right to the villagers, if this resource management right could have given to the peoples, specifically if we could have given this right to the central authority, then the management could have moved well, because the villagers get into the kind of competition rather than cooperation, and they destroyed all the resources because their motive was how they can go for more and more competition and grasp more and more resources, and then they can acquire more and more money. So, and because of this approach, because of this attitude by the villagers, by the commons, so they failed to manage the resources. Here Hardin was telling that if we'll hand over the resources to the villagers for collective action, for community management, his target was if we'll give the resources for the community management, the community will not able to success because community will get involved in the competition, because as the resource is very much open to everybody, so they will engage in competition and they will destroy the resources, because they will not have any intention to preserve and conserve in a sustainable way. Rather, everybody wants to grab as much as they want before, because their intention will be, the community intention will be here what Hardin told. Before X reach, Y will think that I should grab it. Because what X will feel? X will feel that even if I will not procure more and more cattle, if I will not use more and more grass, definitely Y will use. So Y will think that if I will not use, Z will use. Z will feel that if I, even if I want to use, X and Y will use. So that's why everybody will have a kind of misconception in the mind that through, and everybody will have a suspense to others. Everybody will have a develop a competition attitudes of grabbing more and more resources for their personal benefits. So that's why Hardin told, no, community cannot manage the resources in a proper way. 1968, that it's the resource management should be in the hands of the central authority. It's not that central government, state government. He told that should be an authority in the center. Center means don't understand the central government or state government. I'm repeatedly telling, means if we are managing a resource in a locally, the local authority, somebody should be the authority who will have the responsibility of managing the resources, and he will give the instruction of managing the resources. It is not that the common or the peoples can manage the resources. Some central power should be there from which the instruction should be given. Some authority, power center should be there in the center. Some power should be there in the center who will instruct, who will manage, who will guide. Means a centralized authority can manage the resources. It is not that community or the common man can manage the resources. Anybody any doubt till now? Hello, do you got my point? What exactly we are going to debate and hear in? Ananya is speaking something.
No,
Yes, sir.
So you got my point. What exactly I am telling?
Yes, sir.
Clear now? Means how we are developing the approach of managing the resources. What Hardin exactly told, and how we are moving towards a tragedy. Getting my point? Because this is also applicable in the case of everybody's life, wherever you may be. Okay, because generally what happens, this is a human tendency. What Hardin was telling, that if see, generally we have an experience also in rural area. We have seen, suppose we the government installed the Danida well in rural and urban areas, because rural people are or urban people are not part of this. They have not contributed anything. They don't have any ownership rights. Right? So the government did it and handed over to the peoples. But the people didn't have the management strategy. What they did, they misuse it. They wash their clothes. And if X is washing the clothes, if Y objected, then they told it is not your property, it is government property. Who are you to object me? So for which what happened? Then slowly what happened? Everybody get involved in kind of competition, and then the resource got destroyed. Then after a few years, you'll find that well is not function. Okay. So most of the government property is used like that unless and until we have a specific kind of mechanism in managing the resources. These are our earlier experience, what exactly Hardin was telling. Then what happened actually, there lots of people also counter argue Hardin's. But it is not that what Hardin told everybody accepted. So even some people supported Hardin, some people opposed Hardin. What Robert Wade is an anthropologist, he was speaking in 1987. He told that individual has an incentive to ignore the social cost of his resources use for fear that others will capture the benefit of the resources before he could. What I was just telling, the Robert Wade told in 1987, the same thing. He was telling that this is generally a human tendency, that every human being usually they ignore the social cost of this resource use. He was telling that The general tendency to be developed in the minds of everybody that even if I won't use, others will use. Before I reach and I capture the resources, the others will capture and others will take the benefits. So why not I will take the benefit before other reach that area, before other capture the resources? Get my point? See, I'll give another example. When any disaster held in any particular area, the government distribute the reliefs without making any distinction who will get the relief in the initial phase, assuming that everybody is being affected. But when the government sent the relief, what the relief? The government gives some dry foods, the government gives some rice, aloo, vegetables, some kind of packets government distributed. Do you know who are the people always stands in the front to take all this relief? You'll find that the people who are belongs to a highly rich class, the people who have lost nothing, they take the advantage of all the resources. Take the advantage of all the resources, and they are the people who stand in queue first and take the resources, because whatever will be given freely should be taken. It is not that they never think whether this resource is really needed for them or not, whether the resource is meant for them or not, but whatever is given freely, we want to capture. And what exactly happened? Who is more powerful? Suppose you see what Hardin was telling. If you look at that example, who grabbed more and more, who procured more and more cattle? The person who is economically rich will buy more and more cattle so that they can earn more and more money. It is not that poor person who is having very less money in hand will invest more money for procuring cattle. Get my point? So that's why we have to understand very carefully that what exactly even about what I was telling. This is generally the human tendency. So which leads to the depletion of the natural resources. Okay, well, this is general human tendency. And even from my own personal experience, I have seen when the Odisha super cyclone held in 1999, might be you are not born by the time, or some of you might be 1-2 years during that time. So, uh, 99 super cyclone held, I walked down around 150 kilometers. 150 kilometers I walked down to reach at my village, and out of that around 36 kilometers in the water, because our area was completely flooded, and I walked down around 36 kilometers in the water, and around total 150 kilometers. And I, on the way, when I started my walk from Cuttack to my village at Bhadrak district in Odisha, so I have seen that on the way, the people who are not at all affected wants to grab all these resources from the lorry, because all the roads were held, all the public transport was held up in between, and the roads are blocked because of a huge flood in the Bhadrak district. So the communication was completely destroyed, and the people who are not being affected by neither by cyclone nor by flood was grabbing all these resources from the public transport. They were harassing the common people. They're taking all these properties of the commons. So what I'm telling here, this is a general tendency has been developed by the public to grab everything if something is free. Then the Kimber in 1981, Kimber was countering the Garret Hardin. What Kimber was telling? Kimber was telling that it is more likely that Hardin's logic will operate where the resource is not vital than where it is. Kimber was telling that what the Wade also told, what Robert Hardin told, he was not opposing that. Anyway, Wade told long after Kimber. Kimber told 81, Wade told it is 87, 1987. And Kimber was arguing in the context of Hardins. He was telling that what Hardin told, he was not completely denying that, but what he told, Kimber told, he told that what Hardin told, it is applicable to the space, to the area where resource is not so vital, where resource is not so much required. But what Kimber was saying, there are some areas where resource is very pertinent, where the people needs the resource to survive there. So they will not misuse the resource. Rather, the community can well manage the resources. If the resources will be handed over to the local community can well manage the resources. It is not that the local community misuse the resource management. They exploit the resources. Rather, they have a history of managing the resources in a better way. And only thing is, the area where the resource is not so vital, the people may misuse it. But where the resource is so vital for their survival, for their sustainability, for their day-to-day livelihoods, they will well manage. And Vandana Shiva also in 1986, he also in contrast to the Hardin, he was telling that all of you might have heard the name of Vandana Shiva, a very prominent contemporary environmental scientist, Vandana Shiva, and he was arguing that it is not that competition that always been the driving force in human society. In large section of rural societies of the third world, specifically third world countries, including India, the social organization is based on cooperation. The Hardins tragedy of common is not applicable in such a condition. What Bandana Shiva is telling that mostly the people living in the third world countries, they are not mostly involved in the large scale competition. Rather, they believe in the sense of cooperation because their social organization is based on cooperation. And specifically, if you look at the cases of India, India is a country where we always give more emphasis on traditional values, ethics, livelihoods, where the people are mostly based on, our social organization is mostly based on cooperation rather than competition. That's why Vandana Shiva is telling that it is not that always the people are having a tendency to get into the competition. Rather, people cooperate with each other. Vandana Shiva, she was telling that that we have lots of examples where the people used to help each other, people used to cooperate each other. She was citing lots of examples from rural parts of the third world countries, not only India, from other third world countries also. She was citing that how the people help each other, how the people cooperate each other in managing any kind of development strategies, managing the local resources. And she was telling that the people involved in such a kind of cooperation to each other in managing the resources through that the development strategy can be well planned, well motivated, and it is not always that what Hardin told, the people get into conflict, people get into competition in grabbing the resources. Rather, people extend this support also, because we have also lots of example in different disaster and different kind of crisis. Also, the people used to help each other. Whatever the countries, when any crisis comes, they extend the support to each other. And especially in India, we've seen when disaster held in any state, the other states also immediately extend the support. And whether it is Kerala flood, Odisha flood, or any kind of cyclone in West Bengal, anywhere, we have seen very closely that how the different states extended their support. So what Padana Shiva was telling that it is not that the local people, the villagers, the urbanites, specifically the localites who use their resources, it is not that they always get into the conflict, they always get into the competition in managing the resources. Rather, they always try to get into the cooperation, and everybody try to support each other while managing the resources in a better way. So anybody, any doubt till now? I'll stop here, because this theoretical approach is a one section, because if I'll tell everything in one day, you will be highly confused. So just remember because it will be useful throughout your career. If anybody will work on environmental sector, even this approach can be used in any development sectors. So whether it is an example of resource management, but this approach from this kind of argument, the rural development approaches are being developed. Whether it is today we are telling all PRA, participatory rural appraisal. I'll take one class on the next Friday afternoon. I'll take a class on this on this PRA, participatory rural appraisal, which is highly essential for the development sector. Two, three things I'll take class in the Friday afternoon. What are the theory things I'll complete, and I'll assign you some of the tasks in your own local area. You can do wherever you are. So because whenever generally I used to take our students to nearby villages, but anyhow it is not possible now. So I'll assign some of the tasks to you, and you can do some of the theoretical approach. I'll teach you in those in the Friday classes. So what exactly I'm telling here, that you please remember that how this debate is being started from Hardin, then Robert Ward has supported the Hardin, then Kimber and 1981, then Bandana Shiva 86, 1986, how they argued and how Kimber was partially supporting that where the resource is so vital, the Hardin's approach cannot be applicable, but where the resource is not so vital, the Hardin's approach can be, or Hardin's logic can be applicable. And Bandana Shiva was completely rooting it out. She was telling that the third world countries, which is mostly based on the sense of cooperation, because our social organization is mostly based on cooperation rather than competition, for which what Hardin told that mostly the localites get into the competition always in conflict in the resource management, but Bandana Shiva is not disagree. Bandana Shiva is telling that it might be the case of Western societies, but in third world countries where the social organization is mostly based on the cooperation, it is not applicable here. So any doubt till now? Then because there are so many people have debated so many issues, so we'll discuss page wise. Because if I'll post everything, you will be confused.
Sir,
Huh. Tell.
Robert Wade is Robert WADE.
Sorry.
Robert Wade is spelling.
Actually, see, Robert Ward is telling that his approach was he was supporting the Hardin, and he was Robert Ward was telling that uh, he was telling that generally the people living in a particular area, they usually ignore the social cost. They always look after the economic gain. And he was telling that it is a general tendency always develop in the minds of the people that if I won't grab the resources, if I won't capture the resources, and if I won't capture the benefit of these resources, the others will capture. So he was telling that, so that kind of attitude, that kind of tendency always ignite the people that before others reach, you should extract the resources. Get my point? Means it is a competitive mindset. Means what I was telling now, X will feel that even if I will not go, Y will grab it. Y will feel that even if I will not go, Z and X will grab it. So Y will think that before Z and X grab it, why not I? Getting my point? So this is generally a kind of tendency. One second. Hello. Hello. Huh? Just call me after 5 minutes. Just after 5 minutes. One international call was there from a student. So what I'm telling here, you see, so this was the view of Warden. Warden was partially Warden was supporting the Hardin. And then again, what I also will discuss how Warden also changed his view in the later course of time also. And Kimber and Bandana Shiva, till now you remember, they were opposite the Hardin's view. So we'll discuss tomorrow then the rest. And in the next week you have to give the presentation.